Welcome to Mr. Darkhowl, where chilling tales and haunting mysteries await. Like this video, subscribe for more weekly horrors. Now, let the story begin. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It hit me like a wave of stinking charred meat, the kind of odor that makes your throat close and your stomach churn. I was just getting off the bus at Victory Boulevard when the news broke over the loudspeakers. A fire, they said. A big one. But no one mentioned the odd thing that sent a chill running down my spine. Not yet. That was just the beginning. The Kenneth Fire, they called it, first reported at 2:30 p.m. on January 9th, 2025. No one knew how it started, but when it hit the West Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles, it was as if something had been set loose. Something that had no business being there. No normal blaze could rage like that. It tore through the dry hills like a ravenous beast, devouring anything in its path, leaving nothing but ash and bone behind. And then, for the first time that day, the sirens stopped. No warnings, no evacuations. The sky turned black, thick with smoke, and yet no one screamed. I should have known better than to follow the sound of a voice calling my name. I knew better than to trust any voice in the air, especially in the thick, suffocating haze that swirled around me. But I was weak. Weak in ways I didn't understand, because when I turned to look, there she was. Claire. My Claire. The one who had died in the accident 3 years ago. The one I had buried with my own 2 hands, saying goodbye and praying the earth would swallow my grief. There was no time to scream. No time to run. The fire, if it even was a fire anymore, had become something else. Something alive. Something sentient. The ground rumbled beneath my feet as if it were a living, breathing thing. And that voice? I couldn't shake it. Her whisper was in my ear, soft and full of sorrow. I heard her pleading with me to follow her, urging me to step closer, closer to where the trees burned, to where the darkness waited. And then, just as quickly as it had all started, everything went silent. No more fire, no more smoke. I thought I was imagining things, that maybe I had gone mad. But when I looked down, the ground was scorched. Everything around me was gone, wiped clean like it had never been there. And standing where Claire once had been, there was only a shape, a dark shape, a twisted silhouette that shouldn't have been able to move the way it did. I felt it watching me, felt it in my bones, like it knew everything about me. The thing that followed me was no longer part of the fire, it was the fire. I could see its eyes, burning like coals. They held the promise of things I couldn't comprehend, things that I didn't want to understand. As I stumbled backwards, my heart hammering in my chest, the voice came again. This time, it wasn't Claire. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was something else. Something older, something hungrier. It whispered, "You can't escape, not anymore." The fire had been the first warning. The Kenneth Fire wasn't just a disaster. It was a message. A sign that something had been unleashed, and no one was going to stop it. Not now. Not ever. I don't know how much time passed. My legs wouldn't carry me anymore, and the ground beneath me felt as though it had melted into something thick and dark, like tar. The world was spinning, and I knew in that moment, deep in my bones, that I was trapped. But what made it worse, what made my blood run cold in ways I couldn't explain, was the certainty that I hadn't seen the last of it. The thing that had followed me. The thing that called to me. And now, the fire was just the beginning. I couldn't tell you exactly when the terror set in. It wasn't one single moment. It was more like a slow, insidious creeping, the kind that seeps under your skin when you're not looking, the kind that makes you second-guess every shadow, every rustle of wind. The worst part? The worst part was how familiar it felt. How right it seemed to be there in that place, even as the fire that shouldn't have been burning still crackled and licked at the edges of my mind. I had been here before, though I couldn't remember when. I'd lost track of the world I once knew, the one that had made sense, just like I'd lost Claire. Gone. Gone like smoke. I swear I heard her voice again, her name. The same soft, broken sound that had haunted me since the moment she died. Claire. The wind carried it to me, and my legs moved before I could stop them. Before I even understood what was happening, I was walking towards the thing that had twisted her face into something unrecognizable. The fire, it wasn't natural. I knew that now. What I hadn't realized, what no one could have prepared me for, was that the fire was just the beginning of a much darker thing. And then I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the fire. It wasn't Claire, not really. Not anymore. This was something far worse. Something that was wearing her like a mask. Her eyes, those once warm, brown eyes I used to lose myself in, were now black holes. Hollow, and there on her lips that same twisted smile. The fire seemed to pulse around her, feeding off the emptiness in her eyes, feeding off the fear I was too terrified to hide. Her voice came again, a whisper, as if she were pleading with me. "Come closer, Kevin, I'm waiting for you." I didn't move, I couldn't. I felt frozen, my heart a fist in my chest, pounding louder than anything else. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The smoke curled around me, thick and choking, as I stared into the abyss of her eyes. That's when I realized something truly horrifying. She wasn't alone. There were others, hidden in the smoke, watching me. I couldn't see their faces, not clearly, but I knew they were there, waiting, hungry. Then the earth shifted beneath my feet. I felt it in my bones, in the very marrow. A tremor, a low hum of something ancient, something that had been buried deep beneath the hills. And in that moment, I knew what they were. They weren't human. Not anymore. Not ever. The fire had burned away whatever was left of their humanity. It had consumed them, and now it was looking for more. Looking for me. Claire's smile stretched wider, impossibly wide, and the other shapes began to step forward, emerging from the smoke. One by one, they came into view. Former neighbors, people I had known. Some were burned so badly they were unrecognizable. Others were just shadows like faded photographs, their eyes still alive with that same terrible hunger. I was trapped, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I understood. The fire wasn't just a fire. It was a gateway, a rift between worlds, a door that had been forced open, and now the things that had been hidden for so long had come out. They had risen, and they wanted me. I tried to turn, to flee, but something invisible, caught me. My body jerked back as if I were tethered to an unseen force, dragging me toward them. The shapes were getting closer now, their movements jerky, unnatural, like marionettes on broken strings. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The smoke was suffocating, choking me. My chest burned, and I couldn't breathe. And then, in the midst of it all, I heard it again. The voice. This time, though, it wasn't just Claire. It was many voices, layered over one another, murmuring in unison, a chorus of despair. "It's not over, Kevin. You're not safe. You never were." I wanted to close my eyes to make it all go away, but I couldn't. They were closing in on me, and I could hear the rustling of their feet. Claws, maybe. Something sharp, something hungry. I thought of running, but deep down, I knew. There was no running from this, no escaping. And then, as if to confirm my worst fear, I saw it. Something moved in the distance, out of the corner of my eye. It was darker than the shadows, something that didn't belong. Something that should never have existed. It stood there, still as a statue, but I could feel its presence, the weight of it pressing in on me. The thing that had followed me. The thing that had been watching me since the fire first started. It wasn't human. It wasn't even. It wasn't anything that I could comprehend. But its eyes were burning, glowing like coals in the night, and I knew it was waiting for me to take the next step, to come closer. And something inside me, a primal, terrified instinct, told me that if I took one more step, I would never leave, ever. And so I stood there, paralyzed by fear, unable to move or scream. The fire flickered behind me, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, reaching for my soul. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like hours, maybe days. Time lost all meaning, but then the whispers stopped. The flames died down, the shapes were gone, and just as suddenly as it had begun, everything was still. I dared to look around, to make sense of what had happened. But all I found was ash and silence. The fire was gone. The nightmare had vanished. And yet, in the back of my mind, in the pit of my gut, I knew. It wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The truth about the Kenneth Fire, the thing I had witnessed, the thing I had become. It would all come to light soon enough, but not yet. Not until the next step was taken. I had come to know the silence before it swallowed everything. The kind of silence that presses against your chest, that makes your ears ring and your heart beat faster with the knowledge that you're not alone. You never are. Even when the fire is gone, even when the smoke clears and the world seems to return to normal, there's always that presence. The thing that had watched me, followed me, whispered to me in the darkness. It was waiting for me to make my next move, to make a mistake. But what terrified me more than anything was the way I had begun to feel its pull. This strange, horrible connection between us. It wasn't just in my mind anymore. It was inside me. Like something had woven itself into the very fabric of my being, twisting my thoughts, my desires, my nightmares. The fire had done something to me, something that couldn't be undone. I could feel it inside my veins now, like the slow crawl of frost spreading over my skin, reaching deeper with every passing hour. It was in my blood, and it was only a matter of time before it took control. I could still remember the moment the truth settled over me, cold and suffocating. I had been wandering the empty streets, my mind racing with questions that refused to be answered. I was searching for something, some explanation for the fire, for Claire, for the creatures that had taken her, and then I found it. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. I shouldn't have been. But as I stood in front of the charred remains of what had once been a neighbor's house, the ground beneath my feet shifted again. The earth cracked open, and something began to crawl up from the depths. A shape, a mass of writhing shadows and scorched flesh emerged from the blackened earth. It wasn't human. It wasn't even close. It had no face, no eyes, just a mouth that opened wide and jagged like a wound that would never heal. It growled, a sound like rusted metal scraping across bone, before it let out a scream. A long, ragged cry that seemed to echo from every corner of the earth itself. And that's when I understood. I had seen it in my dreams, in the smoke, in the fire. It had always been there. The thing that had started the fire, the thing that had burned everything down, had never truly left. It had waited for me, for the right moment. I could feel the ground tremble beneath me, and my breath caught in my throat. For a split second, I thought I was imagining it. That maybe the trauma of the past few days had broken me, but as the thing rose higher, I knew that I was seeing the truth. I wasn't imagining anything. This wasn't some fever dream. This was real. And then I saw it. The creature raised its head and froze, its grotesque mouth hanging open as if sensing something or someone. My body tensed, and before I could turn, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, heavy, uneven, and then a voice, soft, as if calling to me from far away. Kevin, my blood ran cold. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest, but there was no one there. No shadow, no figure, nothing. Yet the air had thickened, had grown heavier around me, like something unseen was pressing in. Something that I couldn't fight, couldn't outrun. Kevin? This time it wasn't just a voice, it was Claire's voice. It came from the very depths of my soul, as if she had somehow broken through the walls I had built, breaking past the terror, past the madness that had started to eat away at me. But it wasn't the voice I remembered. It was hollow, twisted. It didn't sound like her. It sounded like the thing I had seen before, the thing that wore her skin. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, staring at the thing that had risen from the earth, its body still writhing in the air like a collection of nightmares made real. And then I realized I wasn't the one it had been waiting for. It wasn't me it wanted, it was Claire. And when I turned to face the thing that called my name again, I saw her, or what was left of her. Her body, charred and broken, moved toward me, but not with the grace of the woman I loved. No, this was something worse. This was her body, but it wasn't her. I could see the fire had taken her, had twisted her into something monstrous. And yet, in the back of her eyes, those same eyes, there was still something left, something that begged for release. I reached out without thinking, without the control I usually had over my own body, and the moment my hand touched hers, the world went black. I woke up somewhere else. I don't know how much time passed, maybe hours, maybe days. The place I was in didn't make sense. It wasn't a building or a room or even outside. It was a void, an endless space where nothing made sense. Just darkness and the sickly, burning heat of something that shouldn't have been. My head felt heavy, like I'd been asleep for too long, and when I moved to sit up, I could feel the weight of something else pressing on me. Something cold, something breathing. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to scream. A hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed me by the wrist, pulling me forward. And then I saw it. It was the creature, the one from before, the one that had worn Claire's face. It was standing there, looming over me, its face now visible, if you could even call it a face. It was a twisted mockery, a collection of gaping mouths and hollow eyes, all merged into something that barely resembled humanity. And in the center, right where its heart should have been, was a hole. A hole that burned with the fire that had come before, the fire that had taken everything. And that's when I realized the fire hadn't been some accident, some freak occurrence. No, it had been deliberate. The fire had been a signal, a rift, a crack in the wall between worlds. And this creature, this thing that had once been human, was the one who had started it. The one who had opened the door. I was only the beginning, and now I could feel it coming for me. The truth would be revealed soon enough, but I wouldn't survive long enough to see it. Would I? I didn't know how I escaped. I couldn't tell you if it was sheer willpower or something deeper, something inside me that had been hiding, buried beneath the terror. But when the creature, the thing, lunged at me, I felt that primal surge of adrenaline, the kind that comes in the final moments before death. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, my blood screaming for escape. Its grip was cold, impossibly cold, like death itself was pulling me into the depths. But there was something I couldn't quite place, something strange that started to form in my mind as the creature's eyes glowed, burning with that same ancient, insatiable hunger. It wasn't just a monster. It was a part of the fire, a piece of the hell that had come loose from the cracks in the earth. A being that had once been human, but had been torn apart and reassembled into something monstrous. But then I remembered Claire. I remembered the way she had called my name, how her voice had shattered my soul. It wasn't her anymore. Not really. But maybe, just maybe, if I could reach into the core of what remained of her, I could break the hold it had on me. I wasn't sure how to fight it, but I had no other choice. I reached deep within, through the fear, through the darkness, and I called out, "Claire, please, I'm still here. I can't lose you again." The thing, it stopped. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The air was thick with tension, the silence suffocating. And for that fleeting moment, I thought I saw something in the creature's eyes. Something that might have been her, buried deep within the nightmare. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the empty, hollow void that had become the thing wearing her skin. The creature screeched, a sound so sharp, so piercing, it felt like it tore through my very soul. And with that, the earth beneath me trembled again, as if the very foundations of the world were cracking open. I knew that the creature, whatever it was, could sense it, could sense me. I was no longer just an unwilling victim. I was a threat. I took my chance. The hand that had been clutching my wrist released its grip just for a moment, just long enough for me to scramble away, pushing through the swirling darkness. I didn't know where I was running. Hell, I didn't even know if I was truly running. But I could feel the creature, feel its presence closing in on me, like a shadow creeping closer and closer, suffocating me. And then, by some miracle, the ground beneath me cracked open again. But this time, it wasn't just the creature trying to pull me down. No, it was the earth itself, the very soil, the very fabric of the world, splitting open like an abyss. I felt the pull, the gravity of it, dragging me toward the black hole in the ground. The fire, the real fire, had come alive, and it was spreading again, reaching for me with tendrils of heat and smoke. The flames had come from the rift, from the place where things were not supposed to exist, and now they were hungry, devouring everything in their path. They were hungry for me. I couldn't breathe. The heat, the smoke, the very air was choking me. But through the smoke, through the roar of the flames, I saw it. A small gap, a sliver of light cutting through the nightmare. I didn't think, I just ran. I don't remember how I made it to the gap. I don't know if I crawled, if I ran on sheer instinct, but when I finally reached it, I could hear the fire closing in behind me, the sound like 1,000 voices screaming in agony. I reached my hand out, and in that moment I felt it. A pull, a force that seemed to be pulling me forward, out of the darkness, out of the nightmare. I leapt. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I managed to slip through the gap. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed. The air was clean. The world outside was quiet, still, like nothing had ever happened. I was standing on the streets of West Hills, the sun just beginning to set, casting a soft glow over the landscape. It was peaceful. The fire, the creatures, everything gone, or so I thought. I looked down at my hands, burned, bloodied, but alive. For a moment I thought I'd left it all behind, that I had escaped. But then, just as I turned to walk away, I heard it. That whisper. That voice. Kevin? It's not over. I froze. The thing I had escaped was still there. It was in my mind now, in my very soul, a part of me, lingering, never truly gone. I looked up at the sky, the flames long extinguished, but the smoke still lingered in my lungs, in my thoughts, and I knew that this thing, whatever it was, wouldn't let go. Not now. Not ever. The fire had left its mark and I would never be free of it. But maybe, just maybe, I could live with it, just as long as I could keep running. And so, I walked away.